Hello and welcome to our Co-Innovation Hub Partner Talks. Today it's great to have with us Marshall Ring. Welcome, Marshall. Marshall is CEO of the Manitoba Technology Accelerator. Before asking Marshall to introduce us to MTA and the great work they're doing there, maybe just a very quick geography lesson for our international audience that is joining. So Manitoba is a Canadian province in the central Canada. Capital city is Winnipeg, where Marshall with MTA is based.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. So the Manitoba Technology Accelerator is the premier commercialization engine in our province of Manitoba. We're a private sector, not-for-profit organization, and I have two objectives that I commit to my board of directors. Number one is we want to build more $100 million companies out of Winnipeg, and number two is we want to make Winnipeg the startup capital of Western Canada. Pretty lofty goals. To do that, MTA has three business units. So business unit number one is traditionally what we just call the commercialization business unit. So we'll deal with disruptive technologies that have the opportunity to scale, and we'll try to we'll take them in at the idea stage. So we'll take idea, feasibility, development, or launch as our commercialization pathway. We'll take a disruptive technology concept anywhere along that stage and try to turn it into a global business. So we have in the commercialization business unit, we're not sector specific. We do have a lot of med tech. We have IT, clean tech, and then some power systems engineering companies. Our second business unit is the startup visa program. So it operates very similar to the commercialization program. We'll still deal with disruptive technology ideas, but for our startup visa clients, they're looking for permanent residence in Canada. So they're applicants that come from around the world and want to build their companies here in Canada. And we have about 500 international startups and scale-ups that are under contract with us in that program. So that again gives us a wide variety of technologies that we get to see and work to commercialize or scale. Our third business unit is we directly invest into our client companies. So we have a fund that we deployed about $5 million last year into client companies directly, and we leveraged that into another $5 or $7 million. So we're often, for the types of technologies we see have great potential, we're one of the first angel investors that go into those client companies.
Great, yeah, very interesting. And so in terms of, I guess, as a startup, how do you get into these programs? So do you have the traditional sort of accelerator, programs where you have annual sort of calls? You have like an application process and selection. Can you maybe talk us through that?
Yeah, no, we don't do cohorts. Our personal belief is we're really focused on the company. So as I say, if there's a med tech company or an IT company or a clean tech, they're going to have they're going to need different help from us because the sectors are varied. And if someone comes in at an idea stage, feasibility stage, development stage, or launch stage, they're also going to need different sets of supports. So we don't do cohorts. We're always open to bring in new clients. And so what we'll do is we'll do our due diligence on the clients. If we think we can add value, if we think they are a disruptive technology that can scale, we'll bring them into the program. For the SUV program, we do have a bit more structured process. We have intakes once a month, but again, we apply that same philosophy of one-on-one business mentoring and advisory to help the clients.
Okay, that's great. And in terms of sort of the different stakeholders you work with, obviously you have this big startup and scale up base. I see you have like you have your own mentor network. Probably supporting these companies, these startups. Do you also have any program where you connect these startups with corporates or obviously with investors? Probably do you facilitate those sort of connections?
Yeah, so one of the reasons I'm excited to be here speaking with you today is we don't have as much corporate relationship as I think we should. I'll give you an example of one of the companies that we're working with. It's called Power HV. So Power HV helps build sensors that monitor the bushings in transformers on power grids. Our disruptive technology in this case is we have the sensors that are usually applied are from oscilloscopes, and the oscilloscope costs maybe $30,000 to $40,000. So your sensor costs maybe $40,000 to $50,000 that go on to monitor the health of bushings and transformers. We found a way to alter the sampling rate and frequency generated by the oscilloscopes, so we can use a $500 oscilloscope. So we can now make sensors that have the same functionality and performance, but at a fraction of the cost. Our challenge is finding go-to-market partners, because now we're starting to deal with power systems engineering, consulting companies and utilities. Long sales cycles, you usually don't want to deal with startups. Yeah. So we're rich in innovation, rich in our ability to acquire first customers, but we need to deepen our relationship with corporates so that we can accelerate the path to market and leverage distribution channels and reputations and networks. So yeah, it's certainly a gap in the service offering that we can provide to our clients that I'm trying to support.
No, that's great. Yeah, that's hopefully we can do something together there. We are working with a number of corporates who are in fact looking for technologies around the world. So that's also one of the big sort of interests we have in these sort of in building these sort of relationships. And so you mentioned you work across a number of different sectors. Do you have? Can you talk us? You mentioned a couple, this interesting startup or scale up you're working with. Can you maybe highlight some other interesting company you have within MTA, within your portfolio, that is worth maybe mentioning?
Yeah, I'll lead with the company that we're probably most famous for helping is a company called Skip the Dishes. So they came into our program with 2 employees. They're like Uber Eats or and they were actually acquired by Just Eat. So we helped them go from, as I say, 2 employees to being acquired by a multinational. Today, the business still sits here in Winnipeg, headquartered here in Winnipeg. Probably about 2,500 jobs, and relatively like just a great success that we treasure here in our local community. In terms of portfolio companies that we have now, on the medtech side, we found a way to take a PET brain and insert it or apply it onto an MRI. So there's a number, I don't have the numbers in front of me. Let's say there's 30,000 MRIs that are out there. The multinationals now, Siemens, GE, Philips, they're selling integrated multimodality brain PET systems. So a brain PET that sits on an MRI, so you can do both types of imaging. But there's an entire stock of MRIs that are in the market that are single modality. So we found an aftermarket addition that we can put onto that so a hospital or a research organization doesn't need to buy the new one. They can do the aftermarket add-on. So we're in market with that, but again, would be great if we had a little bit more corporate relationships that can help us scale that. So that would be an example of the type of company that we work with in medtech. So we don't do biopharmas, we don't do vaccines, but lots of diagnostics and imaging. And then I spoke a little bit about Power HV, which would be on the clean tech side or the power line distribution. But so I guess a key is that we have really deep technology companies that have unfair competitive advantages. We're good at building technology. We're good at getting the first couple of customers. Where we lack is finding that pathway to market for scale.
Right. Oh, very interesting. And in terms of the actual sort of facility, obviously you have all the know-how you bring with the expertise, your network, the mentors, probably some support services you provide to all these companies. Do you also have some physical facilities, or are these companies that you within your portfolio, are they distributed, or are they sort of, do they share some working space or?
Yeah. So a great example then. So in the ag tech space, we've invested into a company and we've helped a company. It's called FeedFlow. And FeedFlow, it essentially digitizes how pigs are fed at the pig barns, so that I think the latest numbers is it looks like we have about a 15% increase in efficiency by optimizing the type of feed and the timing of feed and doing animal recognition. So again, it's the Internet of Things with sensors and digitizing an analog system. So they wanted a place to build their prototype, and we do have facilities here where we can build stuff. And so I remember, they had this little model set up and they were pouring the grains up on the top and they had the grinder going and the thing was incredibly dusty and super loud, but it was really fun watching the engineers bring this idea into a scale prototype. But yeah, we do have facilities where we do light manufacturing and no wet labs, but yeah. So we do have, the space to do stuff. Also on food, we have a fully functioning kitchen, and we do some food tech in our facilities as well.
Okay, no, that's great. And maybe an interesting question in terms of the actual business environment. Obviously, we discussed briefly the location, which is looks to be amazing. But in terms of the actual business environment, are there any particular sort of policies, government policies that are encouraging sort of startups to set up their business there?
So one of the benefits, if I might be so self-centered as to say MTA, people want to come here to work with us. We've attracted companies literally, through the SUV program from around the world, but also on the commercialization side. Some of the stronger programs, if you're what's called a Canadian privately controlled corporation, there's a lot of tax advantages both from the federal government and then our provincial government. So we have a program here in Canada called the National Research Council Industry Research and Assistance Program. They bring skills and expertise to help companies be more innovative and more successful when they are innovating, as well as they have a funding program. The province has some funding programs. And then on terms of access to capital, our provincial government has a 45% tax rebate for angel investors. Okay. So if I was to invest $100,000 as an angel investor, I would get a credit of $45,000 that I can apply against taxes. So I actually, it de-risks the angel investor and incents them to come in. And then I'm now also sitting on launching a $50 million venture fund on behalf of the province of Manitoba. So we are starting to solve the access to capital gap that we did find here, but our companies can now find equity-based capital to help them scale. So tax base on operating costs, access to capital and generally speaking, lower costs than some of the bigger cities that you'll find in Canada on rent and labor.
Yeah, makes sense. And maybe it's an interesting fact in terms of the numbers. Since you launched your startup visa program, how many international startups did you actually sort of accept, or do you have within your program?
Yeah, the program lasts 18 months. So we've had a number of clients that have now graduated, and we're at about 500 clients now. That seems to be the number that we have. We're at, I think we've probably had close to 200 graduates, so we're probably with the experience at over 700. And again, a lot of those companies, especially the ones that are coming out of Iran, as a sanctioned company in Iran, they have good technology, they have product, they have sales, they got teams, they got skills. They just don't have markets. So what they're trying to do is come and become a Western company so that the sanctions are mitigated. So again, we think we're sitting on a really rich pipeline of product technology innovation and hopefully trying to find relationships where we can move those into sales and distribution networks.
Okay, no, that's interesting. Do you work with universities and tech parks? Do you have any relationship with any program with the local universities?
Yeah, we're friendly, of course. Most of our companies do not come from the university. there's sometimes some intellectual property rights that make it a little bit more difficult, and there we usually want to, IT companies don't have patents, but med tech, clean tech, they'll usually have patents. Most of the patent activity that we find comes from the private sector, or for people in their garage or their basements inventing things. Probably patent activity, if we look at it, maybe 10% of that comes from universities. So we probably go where the 90% of the activity is, which is private business and individuals.
Okay, no, that's great. That's interesting. We see a lot of that happening also, in terms of especially also corporates working very closely with universities, and just creating these networks, these connections, either to access talents or research, or work with the university spin-offs, which is another big area, obviously.
Yeah, and so even later on this afternoon, so I appreciate it's afternoon where you are, it's still the morning where I am. I'm going to go and catch a drink with someone from our Polytechnic Institute. So we just want to stay close, make sure that our interests are aligned, work as a community. But a lot of our clients don't specifically come from academic institutions.
Great. One last question. I was reading also about this this how you help also Canadian startups, Canadian companies internationalize. You have this this incubator alliance, Western Canadian Incubator Alliance.
Yeah. So we are actually fairly well connected with Chinese venture capital companies and incubators in China. And what we find is when we launch companies in China, it's hard to be a Canadian company being successful in China. So what we try to do is form joint ventures. So again, we try to take the technology, form a joint venture in China, keep some rights on that, but find a local partner who can invest it, who can move it forward. So when I was referencing a little bit about the idea of maybe finding some more partners, probably the idea, and these are thoughts, not conclusions, but maybe we have joint ventures in Germany or Chile, but just I have a firm belief that when you're launching something, and not every company is going to be a global multinational, but when you launch something, if you can find regional partners, that's when you can find some acceleration and success. So the Western Canadian Incubator Alliance, we have alignment across Western Canada, which is about a third of Canada's innovation economy, to take technology, try to bring it into market channel relationships, and scale Canadian technology into foreign or international markets.
That's great. No, so in fact, I was reading about China, but as you said, so it could be interesting to apply that same model in other countries, other geographies, right? So that might be another area to explore further.
I look forward to it. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Wonderful speaking with you.
Thanks, Marshall. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.